So, being able to do a phonological analysis on any unfamiliar language is one of the key concepts that we see or that we study in any introductory phonology course. This class, online class today, is intended to um, walk you step by step through the procedures of phonological analysis. We're going to see a few examples from different languages, but the logical process is, of course, applicable to the analysis of any language and any data set. Let's start with the data from Farsi that we have already seen probably um, before the outbreak of the pandemic. Have a look at this data from Farsi, and we are asked to study the distribution of three sounds or three rhotic sounds in Farsi: the trill and the tap, the voiced trill, the voiced tap, and the devoiced trill. You are asked to whether these sounds. The question is to study the distribution and to determine whether the sounds are allophones or of the same phoneme or they are separate phonemes. The first thing you do is take a quick mental inventory of the different rhotic sounds. It's a good strategy. Acquaint yourself with the data and have a good idea and pinpoint at the different sounds, and ask yourself whether the distribution of these three sounds is complementary or contrastive. You should first, at this point, understand that these three sounds have different manners of articulation. They seem to have the same place of articulation, that is dental or alveolar, but they have the different manners of articulation. The trill, the primary articulation of the trill is that there is a vibration of, recall this from the phonetics, from the lecture on the articulatory characteristics of sounds, that the trill is produced by the vibration of the speech organ, particularly the tongue tip, against the a contact point, which should be in the dental alveolar region. And the trill is characterized by a repeated pattern of opening and closing of this of the oral channel between the passive articulator and the active articulator, whereas the tap is produced with a brief and single contact between the tip of the tongue as an active articulator towards the passive articulator, being the contact in the dental and alveolar region. One interesting, the tap
between what and what?
Between the tip of the tongue as an active articulator and the either if the sound is dental, then it is the dental region, the upper teeth, or the alveolar ridge if the sound is an alveolar sound. But the important thing is that there is only one single brief moment, contact between the tip of the tongue and the alveolar or the dental region, whereas the trill is characterized by a repeated pattern of opening and closing, which is driven by certain aerodynamic conditions. The repeated pattern occurs because the tip of the tongue is contacting or is moving towards the dental alveolar region, and then it's a kind of opening and closing, moving, and then it's like kind of vibration, opening and closing. Mostly it's a pattern of three vibration, three times opening and closing. Okay, let's consider. First thing you do is consider whether there are minimal pairs or near minimal pairs in the data in order to establish whether the sounds are separate phonemes. She, are there any minimal pairs? Of course,
No.
with this small data, it is easy to answer that there are no minimal pairs. But this doesn't mean that this distribution is definitely not contrastive. This means the fact that you don't find minimal pairs means that the distribution of these three sounds is not contrastive. But we are at this point leaning towards thinking that the distribution might be complementary. This is a very important point. The fact that distribution is not contrastive, the fact that you don't find minimal pairs, does not automatically mean that it is complementary. It's possible in some data or in this data that the sounds might be in free variation. This means that free variation, meaning that the sounds do not contrast mean, but they do not occur in predictable environments. Free variation can be, determined by regional factors or social aspects or gender aspects. But the important thing here is to determine whether the distribution is complementary. It is very crucial to identify the phonetic environments in which each phone occurs, or in which the other phone never occurs. In other words, you should determine the surrounding phonetic environment for each phone. To establish this, we need to that they are in complementary distribution. We need to follow the method of compiling local environments. That is, the method of compiling local environments works as follows. For each sound, the three sounds, we need to construct a list of all the appearances each time, including the preceding segment and the following segments. It is imperative, it is very important to go through the data set. Well, here we have a small data set consisting of 10 words. It is important that you go through the data word by word carefully, systematically, in order to reduce any probability of error. By looking at immediately any adjacent environment, adjacent sound, what is the identity of each sound segment? Is it a consonant? Is it a vowel? What type of vowel? Is it at the end? Is it at the beginning? So you need to look at the immediate environment. So I'll show you the next slide where I use this method of listing all the environments of the tree sounds. We start and of course I separate the three sounds in different columns, and here are the words from the data set. So you can see that the Trill variant is on the left. The voiceless Trill, well, actually this is a trill, not a tap, is in the middle, and the voice tap is on the right. Now, very quickly, have a look and try to determine whether there is something that they have. I mean, whether the distribution of each variant is different. taking a quick look, you can see that this variant occurs between vowels, between the two vowels here.
In
Here,
final position.
yeah, this one occurs in the final position. The hash marks the end of words. Note that this line here, this line, the dotted line indicates the occurrence of the sound in question. So this sound in question occurs at the end of words. This one occurs between two vowels, and this
Sir, I believe you muted yourself.
Yes. So do you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, sir. We're still here.
Okay. So we continue. This is actually a summary of the distribution of the sound R. The sound R has three variants. The first variant, which is the tap, occurs between two vowels. The devoiced variant occurs word finally, and the other one has more environments. It occurs elsewhere, and because it occurs in more environments than the previous sounds, we consider this the default variant, and the default or the elsewhere variant will be considered the variant to establish for the phoneme. Okay. Now let's have a look at another data, a set from Spanish, and here again they might have similar sounds from Farsi, the tap r and the trill r. So are these two sounds allophones of the same phoneme, or are they separate phonemes? We need to establish first the
there are minimal pairs.
We have minimal pairs, right?
Yeah.
What are these minimal pairs? We have
3 and 4.
Yes, rojo, which means red. No, no. Here we have yes.
No, number 3 and 4.
Number 3 and number 4. Foro, which with the trill means lining, and foro with the tap means form. So here we have two minimal pair. We have a minimal pair with the sounds occurring in the same environment, and with the words having different meanings. So the distribution of these two sounds, we can say that they have parallel. They occur in the same environment, and because they occur in the same environment, then they are separate phonemes. So we can now, express the difference between Farsi and Spanish, and we can say that in Spanish, the trill and the tap are separate phonemes. Separate phonemes is indicated, the separate phoneme is indicated by the slash. And however, in Farsi, we have only one phoneme, and is realized it has three allophones, so that the trill and the devoiced and the tap are all realizations, allophones of the same phoneme. In this slide, we try now to express, if you want, try to formalize the change. We are saying here that the phoneme r is realized in Farsi either as a tap when it occurs between two vowels, and it is realized as a devoiced variant when it occurs word finally. The slash here means in the context of, and the curly brackets means either either it occurs either it is realized as a tap when it occurs intervocalically, or as a devoiced sound when it occurs word finally. Let's move on now to another data set from the language Daga, and here again we should study the distribution of the two sounds t and s. So we're gonna try the method. First, try to see if there are minimal pairs. It seems that we don't have minimal pairs, so we copy the environments, all the environments separately for each word and for each variant, t and s, in two columns. This is what we have here in this slide. The important thing when you do this method of using columns to write down the separate environments is to have a look at first. You can sometimes you can have a very quick look at the right and left, but I would advise you to look at the right environment first and see whether this right environment is the same as the right environment for. Now we can see that it's not the same. We have here word boundary, and we have here U and A, E and A. Ask yourself whether this environment constitutes a natural class. Natural class meaning that a group of sounds having something in common, having a phonetic feature in common.
I think it has to do with the front vowel.
Yes, so what they have in common is that they are all front vowels. We can think of them as having the feature minus back. However, in contrast, with the sounds, the environment on the right for t, they all have the back feature. They're all back vowels. Plus, we have another environment which is the word boundary. Okay, occurs at there. So I think this is a good start. Sometimes we should look also, if you are not happy with this hypothesis, you might have a look at the left environment and compare the left environment. The left environment.
They are similar.
They are similar. We have the t occurring initially and s occurring initially. S occurs after a, and here it also occurs after a. S occurs after a, and also here it occurs after a. So the left environment is not actually doesn't determine the distribution of these sounds because it is overlapping. They have the same environment. So we conclude that t in this language is a phoneme and has two variants, s before front vowels and t elsewhere. Okay. Next, move now to Spanish, and what we need here to study is the difference between s and z. Are s and z phonemes, separate phonemes, or are they allophones of the same phoneme? So again, have a look and try to search for minimal or near minimal pairs. Are there any minimal or minimal pairs or near minimal pairs of the same phoneme, or are separate phonemes? Doing this mentally without establishing the distribution using tables or t-tables is not easy. Now, what would you tell me about the distribution of these two variants? If you look at the left environment, is the left environment the same or not? It seems that the left environment is similar. We have the presence of the vowel A, the presence of the vowel A, and so we think that this left environment is not really, does not determine the distribution. However, if you look at the right environment, it seems that the right environment for Z is different from the right environment for S. Okay. For the sounds, the right environment, we only have here voiced consonants. L is voiced, R is voiced, Z is voiced, N is voiced, and then. So what we have here, the right environment is a very important determinant for the occurrence of Z. Z only occurs before voiced consonants. The other variant, the voiceless S, occurs elsewhere. It occurs before a voiceless sound, before vowels, before voiceless sounds, before vowels, and at the end, and in the final position. So S variant has more environments. So this could be the phoneme or the elsewhere variant. Okay, that's the elsewhere variant. S is the phoneme, and it occurs, it is changed or it is voiced when it occurs before a voiced consonant. Now, this, we have not talked about the change or the rule that is behind this change. We can call this the voicing assimilation, and in phonetic terms, this is something that is, understandable, given that we have a sound S occurring in the vicinity or in the context of a voiced consonant. It would be natural from a phonetic perspective to make the sound voiced before a voiced consonant. Here we have then a voicing assimilation rule that explains this this change. All right, but what we will focus here today is on the fact that these two variants are allophones of the same phoneme. Why are they allophones? Because they occur in complementary environments. One environment complements the other. What we mean by complementary is that this environment is exclusive. The Z variant exclusively occurs before voiced sounds. This is a limited environment, okay? However, S occurs elsewhere. It occurs, but it does not. The very important thing is the S variant does not occur in this environment, does not occur before voiced consonants. If it occurs before voiced consonants, then the distribution is not complementary. Complementary in the sense that When S occurs in a phonetic environment, that phonetic environment is different from this phonetic environment. That this is the meaning of complementary.
Sir, I have a question.
Right now, yes.
If we have near minimal pairs, do we still say they're in contrastive
Yeah, sure.
distribution?
Of course, yes, yes.
Because the adjusted sounds are the same.
And it would be also good, as a precaution to determine the distribution, to study the distribution of the variants using the tables that I have shown you as a measure of precaution. If you find that the distribution is parallel, is not complementary, and of course you have the near minimal pair as an argument in favor of the sounds being separate phonemes. All right. Now here is another data from French, and here we need to look at the distribution of three uvular sounds: the uvular fricative, the voiced uvular fricative, the devoiced uvular fricative, and the approximant. This diacritic means that the sound is approximant. Now, a fricative and approximant, these are two different manners of articulation. The approximant means difference between approximant and fricative is that with the fricative, we have a creation of a narrow channel between the active articulator and the passive articulator. The channel is so narrow that there is production of friction. However, with the approximant, the channel between the two articulators is just approximating. We have just approximation, so that we don't have production of noise. And so it's the active articulator is only approximating. The channel is wider for an approximant than for a fricative. Right. Let's look if there are any minimal pairs in the data. Do we have minimal pairs or near minimal pairs? Rien, mourir, Marie, prince, train. It seems that we don't have any minimal pairs. And this is how we copied the distribution of the three variants. The voiced fricative, the devoiced fricative, and the approximant, uvular approximant. All right. Let's start with the right environment. The right environment for this one, for the devoiced, we have the vowel A. Here we have the vowel E and OR.
What is the diacritic in the other vowel? What does the diacritic mean in the
That's nasalized,
vowel, the middle?
The nasalized Okay, French has oral vowels A and the nasalized All right. Now the right environment for the approximant variant occurs word finally. So the word final position is exclusive for the approximant. Also note we have here a consonant, le and s. How about the voiced variant? We might think that, but you know, when you look for environments, you need also to look for an environment which is which makes sense. If you look at the left environment, it is the left environment that makes sense. we have here voiceless consonants, and the voiceless consonants p and f are the ones that trigger the devoicing of the sound. So that the devoiced variant occurs when it occurs after voiceless sounds that we have. So the left environment, I think, is very important for the variant, for this variant here.
What
let's
about
look at the
here?
left.
Is it voiceless or voiced in the last
This
count?
is not a year. This is not a year. This is the round high vowel U in French. Okay, this is the round high vowel U. Now look at the left environment for the fricative, voiced fricative. You can see that you have the presence of voiced consonants, vowels, and the initial position. So we can say that this is the elsewhere or the default variant, right? So let's see here. This is the elsewhere variant, the default variant. This uvular fricative is devoiced when it occurs after voiceless consonants, and it is realized as an approximant when it occurs before consonants and word finally. Before consonants, and word finally. When it occurs before. No, we are talking about the approximant. The approximant occurs before consonants and when it occurs word finally. The devoiced one occurs after voiceless sounds, and the fricative occurs elsewhere. Okay, so approximant before consonants and word finally. The devoiced variant occurs after voiceless consonants, and the default variant occurs elsewhere, and it is the default variant which is the phoneme. Let's go now to have a look at another data set. The contrast, or are these two sounds, the alveolar n and the velar n, are these separate phonemes or allophones of the same phoneme? Let's have a look and try to find if there are any minimal pairs. Tinta, tenda, danza, nero, gente, sapone, tingo, tengo. This is a minimal pair. This is a minimal pair, but it establishes the contrast between two vowels, between E and A. Okay? All right, not fungo. Okay, no minimal pairs are available. Let's study in detail the distribution of the two sounds and have a look at the left environment. The left environment is similar. E here is the same, A is the same. So left environment is not a good way. Let's have a look at the right environment. So when you look at the right environment, you see that the two environments for n, for the alveolar n and for the velar n are different. Now, when you establish that they are different, now have a look and try to consider whether this is a natural class.
It is. Velar, they're velar
class. Yeah, all these are alveolar. All these are velar sounds. All right, velar sounds. And here it's elsewhere. We can have alveolar sounds and we can have vowels. So the distribution, since distribution is complementary, then we can say that the two sounds are allophones of the same phoneme, n. N becomes velar. before velar consonants. So again, this change is motivated phonetically, okay, by the context. Since we have when we have the presence of velar consonants, the no which is alveolar becomes velar. So this is velarization or assimilation in terms of place of articulation. The n changes its place of articulation. It becomes articulated farther back in the vocal tract in order to make the pronunciation easier when it occurs in the context or in the vicinity of velar sounds. So voice place assimilation. Okay, now another data set from Spanish.
Sir, I will interrupt you. There are a lot of people asking if there is a code to join the meeting in the group WhatsApp. They're asking if there is a
there is no code. Just I have added the members or the students belonging to the class by looking for their names. However, I can generate a code at the end of this class for the coming online classes in the future.
Thank you.
All right. So we still like have 5 minutes to finish the class, and then we have questions. Next data is from Spanish. And here we need to determine whether the alveolar d and the interdental v fricative, this is a fricative and this is tau, are these two allophones of the same phoneme, or are they separate phonemes? Have a look at the data. Are there any minimal pairs?
No minimal pairs.
No minimal pairs. So we need to establish the distribution give the environments for each variance using the T tables. I haven't used the T tables, but you can let's do it mentally. You can see that the fricative, interdental fricatives occurs between two vowels here, between two vowels. It occurs between two vowels. And the other variant occurs initially and after a consonant. So this is the default, the elsewhere variant. The variant that is the fricative occurs between two vowels. This rule, this change is also phonetically motivated. A stop which is characterized by closure of the vocal tract is changed into a fricative. That is, the stricture or the constriction is opened when this sound occurs between two vowels. It's as if the vowels are open articulations. They affect the articulation of the stop to make it more open-like. This process is called weakening or lenition, or also in some phonology books we talk about spirantization. That is the movement from a stop to a fricative, from a stop obstruent into a fricative, and from a fricative into an approximant, and from an approximant into, if you want, a glide or a vowel. This movement from a stop through a fricative and then approximant is called spirantization, weakening, or lenition. Okay, and the way around the reverse is called lenition. And the reverse, that is the contrary, the movement from a fricative to a stop or approximant to a stop, is called strengthening. Okay, strengthening. We see this when we deal with other data sets and when we talk about the formalization of phonological processes. Now, I think this is the last data from Old English. From Old English, we have two sounds, the ch sound, the velar fricative, the voiceless velar fricative ch, and the voiceless palatal ch. Are these ch and ch, are these allophones of the same phoneme, or are they separate phonemes? This data, small data set from Old English, knecht for boy, miech for manure, fach for hostile, lichten for alleviate, and ucht for daybreak, etc. Let's have a look at the distribution and the environment for these two sounds. As you can see here, on the right we have the environment for ch, and on the left we have the environment for ch. Now let's study the right environment. The right environment is overlapping for both sounds because we have the presence of t. Okay, so the right environment is not a good is not the determining environment, but let's have a look at the left environment. The left environment, we can see that we have different vowels. For ch for the palatal variant, we have front. Yeah, all these are front. So what is very important, this is what I talked about earlier, the natural class. That is, what do these segments have in common? What is the feature they have in common? The feature they have in common is that they are all front vowels. And here they are not front, they are back.
Yeah.
Back plus a central vowel. Okay, this is shva, which is central. So because this variant occurs before, it's because after back vowels and after central vowels, this would be the default variant, the phoneme. So ch, the velar ch fricative, becomes ch after front vowels. But it is a velar after back and central vowels. Again, this change makes sense from a phonetic point of view. We have a velar sound changing its place of articulation, becoming front, becoming more front, that is becoming palatal, because we have front vowels, and front vowels are front compared to back vowels. And front vowels are articulated in the palatal region. So this is a kind of assimilation in terms of place of articulation. The frontness of the vowels, E, and we have seen the front vowels, affect the place of articulation of velar, changing it into a front place of articulation, palatal place of articulation.
It's also palatalization.
We can let's call it fronting. Yeah, fronting. Fronting, that is, it's an assimilation in terms of place of articulation, place assimilation, or fronting. That is, fronting is this change from back consonant to a more fronted place of articulation. The reverse is backing. When you have a change from palatal to velar, that's backing rule or backing process. Backing versus fronting. And all these are place assimilation rules. Okay, now let us have a question and answer session. Are there any questions?